how are they able to manage such a burden of responsibility, or rather, how have we allowed them to continue doing this?
We didn't. I don't think we allowed them to do anything. I don't think we trust them. They just did it without asking us. And by the time we figured it out, decades had passed, and companies were like, hey, how did you think email worked? But like realistically, when, the first people opened their email accounts, it never crossed their minds that they might be giving up their personal data. That wasn't an obvious thing. And furthermore, if you read the terms of conditions, pretty much of any big online company, they are so vague. Basically, it says like they will collect your personal information for purposes such as making their product better and research. And they can change the terms and conditions at any moment. They can share that information with third parties, and they don't have to let you know. So it's so vague that it's not informative. It doesn't tell you which third parties, for what purposes. So even if you read the terms and conditions, which can change at any moment, it wouldn't tell you much. So I don't think there's any consent here. I don't think there's any voluntary consent. We got told after the fact that we had consented and that this was like the bargain that we accepted, but we never got asked. Not even governments got asked. And what happened was, after 9/11, the United States government realized that they could try to harness the power of all this data for the purposes of national security. I think this was a plausible and well-intentioned hypothesis that for good or bad doesn't pan out, because big data is very effective at identifying patterns for which we have billions of data points, like what people buy, because there are billions of people buying things every day. But for things like terrorism, that is always going to be a rare event. It's actually not that great. And so when governments realized what companies like Google were doing, the first reaction was like, no, we have to regulate this. This is insane. But then the second reaction was like, well, wait a minute. Maybe we can actually connect to this kind of data flow and get it and try to use it for national security purposes. And so essentially that blocked the effort to regulate these companies in the US. And literally, you saw the government plugging into the data flow. So in some cases, like AT&T, going into the building and like setting up their shop so that the data had to go through intelligence agencies like the NSA.
Wow, and so everything became a monster in itself, a new one that we never really thought that when I would communicate via emails, I would be consenting to giving all of my information that I perhaps don't even know about myself, because some of these features are also predictive, right, Carissa?
Yeah, a lot of it is based on inferences. And so when people say that they think they know what kind of data they're giving up, I think that's very questionable. So I've heard a lot of people say things like, well, I don't care if Facebook gets data about the kind of music I like, that's fine. But what they don't realize is that Facebook uses that data to infer things like their sexual orientation, which they might not be happy giving out to Facebook.
Wow. So the other one that comes into mind, and you've discussed this previously, is how this thin line into discussing national security purposes and quote-unquote putting in that big word, which is almost like if someone would argue against it, would be like, you are a traitor, you're against the United States. So the question here is, has it been effective? You mentioned that in terrorism it hasn't, but are we aware that this whole confluence of data that involves perhaps me and a million other people, one of them perhaps is plotting to do something, has proven effective, or has it really been just, dirty data?
So the evidence tends to suggest that it hasn't been effective. So all of the committees that have looked into it have concluded that it hasn't been effective. There is one report in the UK that suggests that it has been effective, but it doesn't really give many examples. One of the problems is that all of this is kind of top secret, and so it's very easy to kind of shield behind confidentiality, which is confidential for good reason. So it's a complicated area. But so to be clear, yeah, I think it's true that very often when people raise issues like terrorism, it kind of stops the conversation, because obviously nobody in the right mind would kind of be supportive of terrorism. But evidence suggests that targeted surveillance is very effective at fighting against terrorism. So it's fine to surveil the bad guys when you have enough reason for suspicion. What it's not okay is to mass surveil the general population, because it's not necessary and it's not proportionate. So it's not necessary, but because it can be done in other ways that are less invasive, like targeted surveillance, and it's not proportionate for the same reason, because you can do it in less invasive ways.
Yeah, this reminds me of Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon, right? Where everyone's being surveilled from the center. The whole prison is being surveilled. And we created our own prison in ourselves because, you touched right now on one of the reasons why privacy eroded, which was 9/11, which was a huge shift in everything, especially in going to the TSA airports here in the United States, which is very difficult, but also privacy concerns. The other one is how, for example, Mark Zuckerberg, you write on Privacy is Power, he says that privacy is no longer a social norm. We don't no longer care. And I would like to ask you, is this true? And on the other hand, is it not true? Because all of us, especially younger generations, are obsessed with sharing everything. We don't care anymore. We just post everything that we think and we share it on social media. Everyone has to be involved in our lives 24/7. So is Mark Zuckerberg right, Carissa?
So Mark Zuckerberg famously said this in 2010, that we had kind of evolved and that privacy wasn't important as it used to be. And he had to backtrack himself. So in 2019, he claimed that the future is private, which of course is a great irony given the work that Facebook has done to erode privacy and to kind of try to convince us with that narrative that privacy is no longer important. And obviously, whenever the CEO of a tech company says something, we have to kind of put it into context. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg has a great interest in peddling that kind of narrative. While at the same time, he bought the 4 houses surrounding his in order to have privacy. So I would rather view it as a very effective way of marketing and nothing to do with the truth.